Should the Mets trade Pete Alonso? That's what we're talking about today. It's literally the only thing. A deep dive into the Mets payroll, into Pete Alonso as a player, into the future of what this trade could possibly look like, if it's even worth it. That's what we're doing. We're going deep into it. Let's get going. James, just initial reaction. Let's just give our initial reactions first and foremost. Should the Mets trade Pete Alonso?
No.
No. The answer is no. But is that the right answer? Maybe not. I mean, there's been a lot of discourse. Like, everybody talks about, obviously, the Mets payroll and how it was one of the highest last year. It's going to be high again this year because of how the contracts are structured.
Highest ever.
Highest ever, of course. Can't forget highest ever. And Pete Alonso is one of the top paid players. He is going into the offseason this year with 1 year left on his contract. He is a Scott Boras client, if I'm correct, right?
Yep.
And
newly.
Scott Boras clients do not sign extensions, especially during the season. Pete's going to test free agency. So do the Mets want to trade Pete Alonso during the offseason, maybe at the trade deadline, to try and maximize the value if they think they're not going to be able to re-sign him? Or do you just play out the year with one of the best first basemen in the league?
I think the best way to look at this, at least to start looking at it, is to see similar players that have been traded. And that might be a loser's exercise, because as the Mets trying to apparently negotiate a contract with Pete Alonso and Scott Boras, representative, they're trying to negotiate him as a first baseman, but they keep saying that he's not just first baseman, he's one of the best power hitters in baseball. But for our purposes, I think we have to think about him simply as a first baseman.
That's what he is.
He is a first baseman. He offers very little defensive value, not because he's a bad defender per se, just because first baseman as a position isn't a position that's one of the most valuable in terms of defense.
Yeah, unless you're Keith Hernandez, you're really not making an impact at first base. I don't want my first baseman to make an impact at first base. Hit the ball.
You just have fewer opportunities to put your glove on the ball. Most of but besides every single play, but that's really just a catch, maybe a scoop. That it's not like a shortstop, a second baseman, a center fielder, a catcher, where your defensive value is a little more important to the way a game's going to go. Your job mostly is to hit, and Pete hits really well. But we're going to get into that in a second. But again, to start this, three premier first basemen have been traded in the last 15 years of baseball that I think offer a pretty good benchmark for what Pete Alonso theoretically could get in a trade.
Similarly valued, similar ages, similar kind of negotiations.
Similar studs, similar time left in their contracts.
Yeah, 100%. So the first one's going to be Paul Goldschmidt, because that's not the most recent, but that's probably the most comparable, because he was traded in the offseason to the Cardinals.
Yes.
With an expiring contract that offseason, I believe.
At either 30 or 31 years old.
Yep, which Pete is going to go into his 29-year-old season, I believe, this year.
He's 29 now. He might be turning 30 by the time the season starts.
December 7th is his birthday, so we are actually good for the entire
Just turned 29?
Yeah, just turned 29.
Happy birthday, Pete.
Happy birthday, Pete. But Paul Goldschmidt, he was traded, of course, from the Diamondbacks to the St. Louis Cardinals, and the players that they got back are shockingly bad.
And at the time, they seemed not so good, and now as time has gone on, they seem far worse.
And of course, that's, like hindsight's 2020. Everybody can see things clearer now that we actually are able to see these two guys play out.
And since that trade happened, the Diamondbacks have one NL pennant, and the Cardinals have none.
Yes, which that's actually so funny to think
Is that
about.
funny?
That's kind of crazy to think about, that they traded away arguably one of the best players in their franchise's history and got garbage for him, literal garbage. And they were more successful than the team that traded for him.
And it's not like they were ever over the luxury tax where they had to get rid of the penalties.
No.
They just happened to clear a spot and just happened to get another guy to walk into it.
So Paul Goldschmidt was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals for Carson Kelly, Luke Weaver, and Andy Young. You've heard of two of those names, not for good reasons. Luke Weaver has bounced around on, I feel like, 4 or 5 different teams since that trade, has never been good. Carson Kelly, backup catcher. He had 1 or 2 seasons
couple
where
nice
he was
years.
okay with the Diamondbacks. Had an injury, has never been the same.
No.
He's the best of the bunch, which is kind of scary to say. And then Andy Young, I think, has been a career minor leaguer.
Backup infielder.
He's gotten like sprinkles here.
He's
and
hung
there.
around different
But
places, second base, yeah.
These are guys being traded for Paul Goldschmidt, who I think at the time, like if we're going to compare Pete to Paul Goldschmidt when they could possibly be traded, Paul Goldschmidt's just a far superior player.
Truly, and that might be hard for some Mets fans to hear, but Paul Goldschmidt is a guy who had one MVP by this point. Have he won 2 MVPs? 1 MVP.
No, he hadn't won one yet.
Oh, he hadn't
Not
won
one yet, but he had finished like top 5 every single
He
season.
won one with the Cardinals. I thought he won one with the Diamondbacks. Never mind. But higher average, which take it here nor there. Fewer home runs than Pete, but probably just as many extra base hits, because how many more doubles, even triples Paul Goldschmidt hits. Steals bases, again, higher average. And
he was a Gold Glove fielder, too.
that doesn't feel like enough for a trade.
No.
And he was even a little bit older than Pete. And the Cardinals did, the second it happened, give Paul Goldschmidt a massive extension. Paul
100%.
Goldschmidt has 1 MVP since that trade, but weirdly enough, the Diamondbacks have had significantly more postseason success than the Cardinals.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense how this ended up working out for them. I think they also sent a little bit of money, too, maybe in that trade. If I had to guess, they probably paid his contract for that final year. But that's one of the best first basemen that we've seen in our lifetime, and he got traded for nothing. And at the time, it was scraps.
Which it wasn't scraps at the time. It looks like nothing now. It didn't feel like much at the time, but I think the way a lot of these trades happen, especially for a team like the Diamondbacks, who I think similarly to where the Mets are right now, was trying to compete on the fly, retool rather than rebuild.
Fair.
And I think they were like, we're getting a major league pitcher we think has upside. Because this time, Luke Weaver was a good prospect. And he had put together a decent season in the league. He had a good fastball. He had a good changeup. He was trying to develop a slider. It never came.
Harsh.
And Carson Kelly was someone who was a good prospect, who had time in the major leagues. And he had a couple of those spurts as a backup catcher to Yadier Molina where like, oh, this guy has power. This guy commands a pitching staff. This guy's a pretty good defender. Yeah. And he did have one very good season with Diamondbacks, if not two, if I remember correctly. So
like 1.5, yeah.
Looking back now, hindsight 5 years past that trade, it does look really bad. But at the time, the Diamondbacks were like, okay, you know what? We still want to compete, and we just got two major leaguers. We think right now in this trade we're getting 160 innings and a 2-WAR catcher. And then another guy who's a lottery ticket, maybe also high floor, low ceiling.
And again, remember, we're telling you all this just to have a little kind of
talk
background of what a trade could look like for Pete Alonso. Because at the end of the day, if Pete is traded, you have to be getting a lot back. You got to have something back that's going to make your team better or make your team better in the future. So we're trying to set the scene of what that return could look like to help boost our kind of argument here as to why maybe you should or shouldn't trade Pete Alonso.
Yeah, and whether we feel like it's a lot back or don't feel like it's a lot back, sometimes it might be kind of views a lot in like a baseball sense rather than like a unsexy sense. Like we talked about in the last episode, the Mets trading for Adrian Hauser and Tyrone Taylor.
Yeah.
That's not a sexy trade by any means. The Mets just got two players who are going to be playing a lot of baseball this year.
100%.
Which is a lot in terms of any trade.
But they didn't give up Pete Alonso.
Of course, no. I'm just saying in general, like sometimes trade returns, like you're talking about how it's trash, it's garbage. Like at the time, it didn't feel that good, but it was like, okay, there's two Major League Baseball players for a team that wants very much to try and kind of compete.
And I think that's also my YouTube brain because we'll talk about the other trade here that's coming up with Matt Olson, which is probably the most recent of all these big first basemen that we're going to mention. When he got traded from the Oakland A's to the Braves in what is for sure a fleece job, and at the time felt like a fleece job. But they were getting Christian Pache, who was a top prospect at the time. Granted, he had stunk at the major league level, and there were a lot of concerns with his game. He had been dropping in ranking, so he wasn't as highly touted.
Totally, but people did still think in the baseball world that Christian Pache was a prospect that at least had a very high floor because of how good of a defender he was in center field. And the fact that if you're that good of a defender in center field, like even if you never find any kind of power, which he just never found any kind of anything, like even if Christian Pache just had like 4 years where he's been like this version of Victor Robles, that'd be like, okay, that's someone who plays baseball for our team.
Yes.
And that's something.
They also trade for Shea Langoliers, who looked not great last year, but also he's probably just a fine catcher. I'll give him he's fine.
Which is something, yeah.
And then Joey Estes, who is a 22-year-old left-handed starter who got some time at the majors last year, probably going to be a part of their rotation. He's just not they trade for a lot of high floor guys.
Especially pitching high floor.
Yeah, except Ryan Cusick, who looks terrible. He looks terrible, and he was such a fake prospect for the longest time. Just didn't have any stuff whatsoever. So that's what they got back from Matt Olson. They were also in a scenario similarly to the Mets in that everybody knows that Matt Olson wasn't coming back to the A's, and not that everybody knows that Pete Alonso isn't coming back to the Mets. I think it's still very possible he is on this team for his entire career.
Of course.
But the idea is that everybody knows Pete's going to free agency this offseason. Like, there's almost no chance he signs an extension.
There was another Met a year ago that signed a deal with Scott Boras, and everyone kind of flipped the shit a little bit, and it was Brandon Nimmo.
Yeah.
Who just took some meetings, eventually Mets gave him the best offer, and eventually came back to where he wanted to be.
And let's be honest, I was terrified when I heard that news.
Totally.
That he signed with him. I was like, fuck. Someone's going to understand how good Brandon Nimmo is, and we're going to be priced out. And Nimmo took a really friendly contract for both sides.
Decent contract. I wouldn't say friendly. He got paid, but he also deserved to get paid. He even got like Aaron Nola this year, who tested free agency for like 9 seconds.
Yeah, he was
went exactly back to where he wanted to be.
It's like, I want to go back to the Phillies.
I like my home. I don't want to move my kids.
So that's the Matt Olson trade. The last one we're going to talk about is Mark Teixeira.
And I think that there's a similarity between the first two that we just mentioned because those were two trades that were made in the offseason.
Yes.
And now the difference is Mark Teixeira trades that it was made in season.
Yes, and Mark Teixeira was traded at a younger age with more control for Casey Kochman.
One additional year of control.
And some other dude that's not
Casey
important.
Kochman, Bo, you said?
Well, I guess originally he was traded to the Braves.
That's what I mean, yeah.
To the Braves from the Rangers. Let me pull this one up here. I'm going to grab the laptop for this because there was a lot. But it was from the Braves, from the Rangers to the Braves for Matt Harrison, who pitched in World Series games for the Rangers. Elvis Andrus, who is one of the best shortstops in their history. Neftali Feliz, who was a huge part of their closing. Mm-hmm. Jared Saltalamacchia, who was a extremely highly touted prospect. Like he was supposed to be the next big catcher.
And became a fine baseball player.
Now, that being said, Mark Teixeira was a little bit different than Pete Alonso because Mark Teixeira was 27 years old when that trade happened. He had another full year of control underneath his contract as well, which is huge. You can't discount that by any means. And he played Gold Glove defense at first base. He was also an elite power hitter who hit 300.
Wait, so did I misspeak? Was that first trade also an offseason trade?
Matt Olson?
The first Teixeira trade.
No, it was during the
So
season.
both were in season.
Yes.
Oh, because you trade back-to-back trade deadlines.
I'm looking at this right now, and the first one was for sure during the trade deadline. The second one was also during the trade
Okay, so
deadline,
yeah,
which
that's
is
what
more
it was.
comparable to
Yes.
Pete, where he was traded from the Braves to the Angels for Stephen Merrick, which you've never heard of him, and Casey Kochman, who at the time was a younger first base prospect, but similar to that of the rumor of Matt Mervis with the Cubs.
Yeah, so again, the point to drive home now with this trade with Mark Teixeira. One, it was a different era of baseball. We
Definitely.
can't stress that enough. So I think power hitting first baseman. Teixeira was a power hitter who also hit for average, who also had a great glove. Like he was considered one of these like very
hitter, too.
Yeah, switch hitter. I forgot that. Very good, well-rounded baseball player. But it was still an era of baseball where I think teams were, for lack of a better term, just a little bit stupider.
Yeah, a
Where
little dumber.
There wasn't a lot of this like complex decision-making bodies that were going in. There wasn't a lot of game theory going on in these front offices. There were some guys in rooms with suits cutting deals.
Like, imagine trading Mark Teixeira for a guy who's basically the same age as him and just way worse.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like Mark Teixeira was 32 and you got a 25-year-old first baseman, Casey Kochman. Mark Teixeira was 27, 28 years old.
And I also like those two Mark Teixeira trades as kind of a way to like teach this lesson about how much different a player is viewed in the trade market with 1 year of control versus less than 1 year of control. And right now, Pete's in a spot where thinking about the comparable trades I've made for other first basemen, thinking about how much team control he has, thinking about how much even buzz there is, it's very hard to see this kind of Godfather package coming back for Pete Alonso in any way. And I think a lot of Mets fans are kind of clinging to that hope. We're like, I don't want to trade Pete Alonso, but if it happens, it has to be like an offer you can't refuse. Where
And I agree.
totally.
I think if we get an offer that you can't refuse, there's a real conversation to be had.
However, that's just not possible.
It's not going to happen.
It's never going to happen. The only way it might happen is at the trade deadline when you have someone's feet to the fire. And that's the way it might happen. It's not even close to guaranteed.
I mean, we could bring up my favorite trade of the offseason, Juan Soto. Now, he's not getting paid $35 million like Juan Soto, but he's going to get 20.
22.
He's going to get $22 million this upcoming year. Juan Soto was
Projected.
traded for a lot of major league caliber players. Outside of Michael King, none of them really have much of a ceiling, per se.
No, I mean, not much of it. I mean, ceiling is kind of a
It
weird
was
term
another
for
high
pitching.
floor. It was another high floor.
Another high
thing.
floor, right? Pitchers peak like 28, 29, 30, 31. So like these guys who are traded who are 23, 24, 25 years old. They might peak not in the Padres.
True.
But I'm saying like Randy Vasquez probably there is like some ceiling on there. My guy Johnny Brito, there's probably a little bit of ceiling on there.
Don't
But
get me started.
there's something we argued about. But there's also the same kind of context with where the Diamondbacks came from, the Paul Goldschmidt trade, where it's like I'm trading one of my best players, but I also want to compete next season.
I want 8 players that can help me right now.
I want players on my major league roster. It's just simply going to cost more money than prospects who are more volatile and make less money, especially if more team control. So that's also kind of where the Mets are right now. We talked a lot about this on the last episode about where the Mets are right now, what can hope to happen. But
Yeah.
it's kind of a bit of a strange logic exercise to be like, I want to trade one of the best players on my team who no one on my team does anything like him.
No.
That's another thing. Team context for the Mets. Should we trade Pete Alonso? Not only is he the best power hitter in baseball since he came to the league, nobody has more home runs since the beginning of 2019 season. Pete Alonso's rookie season, then Pete Alonso. I think he's 25 clear of the pack, and that pack being Aaron Judge and Matt Olson.
Yeah.
There's no one else who could fill in kind of this role. Not only is there no obvious first baseman fill in, but there's no obvious power fill in. The Mets have struggled for the last 2 years. One of the main reasons, besides pitching depth, more so last year than the year before, but the big playoff run, there's just a lack of power. It's a very contact-oriented team, more of a gappy team than an over-the-fence team. And you can't really win that much in baseball like that, at least not in a sustainable way. Like, you need power to make it. The Mets, in fact, rather than trading Pete Alonso right now, need more power on this time.
Like, if Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty came up and Ryan Mauricio was healthy this year.
And they came up smoking the ball
Yeah,
last
we saw
year.
them hit kind of Alvarez like 25 homers as a rookie. You'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, moving Pete's a little bit easier because
At least
like,
there's more logic to be taken from it.
yeah, 1,000%. Like it'd be like a very like savvy Rays move. I would
Yeah.
consider that. But the fact that this lineup so desperately needs Pete Alonso, and he really does. Like they trade Pete Alonso, this team's gonna be really bad
I don't even know anyone who's more productive in Major League Baseball than Pete Alonso right now. Like
for the Mets. And like again, in the context of the lineup, probably
Yeah.
Aaron Judge because up until they trade for Juan
Sure.
Soto, that team was a minor league lineup
Totally.
without him.
Yes, but even like Aaron Judge, like he got hurt last year. Like I don't know how many players in baseball have 100 RBIs back-to-back years. We're not an RBI podcast, but like theoretically, it's not really that many.
Like RBIs are not a skill.
No,
It's not like a skill you can teach someone. You
But
can't
you-
be like hit
if-
RBIs, but
if
he
you
does
keep
it.
getting them, and
Yeah.
especially because he keeps hitting in the middle of this order, I wonder where he's actually going to hit this year. Because last year Buck was obsessed with hitting him cleanup because he looked like a cleanup hitter.
'Cause
But
he's an idiot.
But apparently Pete probably liked that as well. Like Pete's like, I am a cleanup hitter, similar to how Daniel Murphy walked into every club. I said, I'm Daniel Murphy. I hit third. But I've always loved the world where we can just go Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso.
What a first! What a
Maybe
first
it's
inning.
possible. It could happen this year. We'll get there when we get to spring in a few months. But in terms of the Mets team context and just where another power replacement can be, it does make very little sense to trade Pete Alonso. But the one place that there is an argument, there is a devil's advocate, there is something to say for trading Pete Alonso is just based on the fact of how much salary the Mets have shed from 2023 now to 2024, how much more will be shed by 2025, and what that means for their future luxury tax penalties.
Yeah, theoretically, trading Pete gets them under. Like, it's going to get them under the tax threshold.
Yeah.
And
at least very close to it.
that matters more to other teams than it does the Mets.
Yeah.
And the Mets did shave a lot of salary off. I mean, we were looking it out. Maybe you'll pull up the laptop and get some of the more specific numbers. But the Mets are not as high. Like, last year they paid, what, $100 million in tax penalties?
100 mil.
This year, right now, I think they're projected to pay, like, 4 or 5. Was that what we read? 4 or 5 million?
I think it was 2.5.
2.5.
I'm a little connected on these wires down here. I'm a little scared.
All right,
So
let me
move
grab
that much and unplug.
Let me grab my laptop for you.
Trusty
You
laptop.
can play around with this one here, but I'm gonna let you handle it. Yeah, you can use the laptop.
It's always weird touching another man's laptop.
Is it?
Always.
I've never felt that
Okay,
once in my life.
interesting. But as of right now, before all the arbitration is included into the Mets salary this year, they're at $257.5 million. The luxury tax penalties for 2024 are going to be $237 million. So you're like, wow, 257, 237, Pete's projected $22 million. That's basically it right there.
Basically the number.
But that's without the rest of the Mets arbitration numbers. There's going to be more money in arbitration. It doesn't exactly get them under, but what that does do is put them in a situation where I don't think this is the most important thing in the Mets. I don't think this is the most important thing is Steve Cohen, but it'd be a situation where they're like, okay, if we get rid of this huge chunk of money, now we're basically 2 moves away from being under and resetting everything. And I just know every time you're over the salary cap year over year, your penalty increases for how many years over. 20%, 30%, right now the Mets are at 50%, which I believe is the highest threshold for being over 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So we're paying 50% of what we're over right now in the luxury tax. But as of right now, that's really not a high penalty for the Mets.
Now, yeah.
As of right now, it's not, depending on how much more money we bring in. But as of right now, that only puts the Mets estimated tax bill, even with a 50% tax for what's over for your balanced tax base, at $2 million.
Yeah, which is, I'm going to say it's an insignificant amount of money.
It is totally insignificant.
It's insignificant. You win a couple more games, and all of a sudden, like, you got
what I mean.
fans coming in, that $2 million moves real quick.
And those $2 million don't really feel like anything because last year, at the trade deadline, Steve Cohen and the Mets brass were fully okay with paying down massive amounts of salary for Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, and even Mark Cannon, Eduardo Escobar, and Tommy Pham, just to get better prospects in. And I do know that, for sure, the people working the math inside of the Mets front office
know it better than us.
We're very aware of how every single move and every single dollar was going to affect your eventual tax bill. And they were still like, just get the better player.
Yeah.
And now the Baseball Prospectus top prospect list just came out. And last year, the trade deadline, the Mets acquired their second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth best prospects in the organization.
Yep.
All because they paid more money than other teams were willing to pay to acquire better prospects.
And, like, if you look at those contracts, like Scherzer and Verlander basically are cutting half this next season for the Mets. You put them together, that was like one contract for each of them. So it's like they're just paying Scherzer or they're just paying Verlander to be on another team, and they got rid of the other guy. Losing Cano, losing Cano, losing Escobar. All this money came off the books. I think it's getting overplayed a little bit, payroll thing with the Mets and the penalty and how much Pete Alonso can change. Because, like, realistically speaking, let's just say they're even 20, 30 million over.
Yeah.
It's $10, $15 million for the Mets, which me and you, that's a lot of money.
Tons.
And I think all of us listening know this is a ton of money. But to Steve Cohen, do you really want your team to be so much worse to save that money when, like, realistically, like, we know that this organization does care about optics a little bit here. And Pete Alonso is he's a star. He's a superstar. He is the Mets. He's part of that brand.
Let's fucking go Mets.
He also is someone who is technically on a Hall of Fame trajectory based on how many
100%.
home runs he has in his first 4 seasons. And the other part of this is, if you do trade Pete Alonso, like we said before, if this were to totally reset your tax penalty, there's
buy it.
at least I can see it a little bit, but it's not. There has to be another series of moves made to take down what this team can do in the next year, especially when you're already paying so much for players not in the team. That it feels like you're just maybe a year away from actually resetting that.
And to be fair, like, this upcoming offseason, there's a lot of money coming off the books again.
And even before that you pay your tax penalty based on where your salary is at the end of the season.
Yes.
So right now, where it is, it's hard to project where Mets will be at the end of the season. Maybe the season becomes great and the Mets are in playoff race and the Mets are out tracking for 85, 90 wins by July. You know what? I'm not trading Pete Alonso.
No.
Maybe I'm bringing in another reliever. Maybe I'm bringing in another starter. We'll take the extra couple million. We're trying to get back in the playoffs, trying to do good. Maybe the season doesn't go very well for the Mets. Maybe you get to midseason, you're like, okay, if we get Pete Alonso off the books right now and we take those $20 million away, along with Jose Quintana and along with maybe another player in the starting lineup, then we actually can reset our penalty going into next season. Like, this is more of a dynamic decision than something we have to say it's cut and dry right now.
I also think, and maybe I'm crazy for saying this, but there is no rush to trade him right now. You still have the entire season. Pete had a down year last year. Like, we would be trading him theoretically off his worst season of his career.
Kind of.
It was. I mean, he hit 46 home runs, but he also hit 210.
Yeah.
Which we're not batting average podcast, but that lowers all the numbers across the board. Like, OPS plus wise, it was one of his worst. Let the guy play the season. Like you said, see where the Mets are, see where we're at. Again, 85 wins is going to get you in the postseason.
Yeah, as we just learned.
With the Diamondbacks. And then once you're in, roll the dice and see where it lands.
Have some fun.
So the idea of what would the Mets look like with or without Pete Alonso, they're two completely different teams, and I think it would be really, really hard, one, to sell the fan base, and two, I think a lot of the players would be really frustrated that this guy who is such an integral cog of this team is no longer a part of it because the Mets wanted to save theoretical dollars.
Yeah, and also just as a homegrown guy, like someone who's been here for a while now, like he's someone you could really just simply build around.
And he's so good.
And it really just helps the entire floor of a Major League Baseball roster when I know for sure I have a first baseman who has 40 or 50 homers.
He's going to play 160 games.
A shortstop who's a superstar and a center fielder who's an all-star. Like I have these three things in place always. Let's let the rest of it fill out. Like that's just a baseline.
Those guys are elite.
Yes, and the bottom line is the only reason the Mets are over this luxury tax line right now is because of all of these money we're paying to guys not on the team.
Yes.
And again, these decisions were made, and these decisions were then unmade at the middle of the season. I'm totally aware of this. If the Mets were that concerned with the luxury tax right now, they would have taken worse prospects for these players last year and told teams to pay their salaries. Look, right now, the Mets are paying their catcher position over $17 million.
For guys who will not play.
While their starting catcher makes the league minimum. And that is James McCann, that is Omar Narvaez, and that is Tomas Nido. Like that, it stinks right now. The Mets have one of the highest catcher bills in baseball for three catchers that are not going to play much for the Mets, if at all.
They're essentially paying Francisco Alvarez, like, theoretically, $17 million.
Yes. Starling Marte is making money right now that maybe the current version of Starling Marte doesn't deserve. Maybe Starling Marte bounced all the way back. Maybe he does not.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of money right now that's in places that's just not on the field, and that's the reason. So then it would really be a swift kick in the dick 100%. To then take the best part of what's on the field, take another chunk of money off the field, and then say it's not. But then even you get into another logical bout where it's like, if we're not going to, why am I paying Francisco Lindor $35 million then?
Yeah.
Like, once you stop paying Pete Alonso, why are you paying anybody?
Yeah.
Like, why is our closer making $20 million? Like, if you trade Pete Alonso.
Why is Jose Quintana making $13 million?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you trade Pete Alonso, the next logical step in my mind is trading Edwin Diaz.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to do that either.
I don't want to do that at all.
But I'm just trying to talk through logic, trying to talk through reason, trying to see, like, how actually, like, what, if a move makes sense for not this year, but maybe the year after that, how you see the vision. And the process-wise, it's hard to see that. And also, we're saying this theoretically because you guys are here to click, and we're trying to build this thing back up.
Of course.
David Stearns, every opportunity this offseason, says, I expect Pete Alonso to be the Mets first baseman on opening day.
Pete's a really good player, and I expect him to be a Met on opening day.
Oh, 1,000%.
And I think some Mets fans don't really hear that because for some reason they lack trust right now, even though he's done a pretty good job this offseason, David Stearns. But
they listen to WFAN sometimes.
Yeah, listen to other idiot
Gotta
podcasts.
listen to Mets'd podcasts.
That's
but
it.
like, I mean, and again, I think this is another big part of it too. The package they're going to get back is going to be
not good.
So underwhelming.
Not going to be good.
Like, I know
you guys
it's
are
like,
going to be pissed.
It's the Bleacher Report rumor, so like it's nonsense. But like, Cade Horton and Matt Mervis
Never.
is probably a realistic package back.
They'll never trade Cade Horton for Pete Alonso.
But, well, that was what I was about to say. And Cade Horton's probably untouchable because
100%.
he's one of the top pitching prospects right now in baseball. And I want nothing to do with Matt Mervis, who is bad.
Yeah, he's like
a bad
2 years
player.
younger than Pete Alonso and not good.
And he's like 3 years older than Mark Vientos and also stinks.
Yeah.
So like, I don't realistically think that some team is going to come to the Mets with this package that blows them away. And I think if they do, like you said, I think that's when you start to consider it. Is like, if let's just pretend you're talking with the Cubs and they're like, we're going to give you Ben Brown and Owen Casey.
I'll do that.
I'll do that because you're getting one of the best pitching prospects in baseball and one of the most exciting young outfield prospects in all of minor league baseball as well. But that's not happening.
Totally unrealistic. And also, another part of this is I think all these Pete Alonso trade rumors really came to a head during the latter half of the Mets season where the team was not very good and had nothing to talk about. And then a lot of these people in the media rely on the Mets for their clicks and everything they do. So the Mets are like a button that a journalist can click and be like, I can tweet something crazy about the Mets, and people go crazy. Impressions will go crazy. Mets fans are nuts. Tweets about Michael Tonkin get hundreds of millions of impressions, hundreds of thousands of impressions. Like, we are psychopaths.
Yeah.
Psychopaths. Like, you guys are throwing yourselves over the moon right now. That we
listen to us talk about this for 30 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. Right? Like, why not? I'm happy to do it. And I lost my train of thought here. So then another part of that was the Milwaukee Brewers seemed to be the team that leaked a lot of this stuff, that they had conversations about Pete Alonso. And now we know why that happened, because we stole their president of baseball operation.
We stole the brains.
And their manager got stolen as well, and they figured we were going to steal him too. He just got stolen by somebody else. Like,
I also think it's like crazy important to mention, like, every team takes trade call offers from everybody. Like,
no,
you'd be stupid not to. Like, we were talking about Moneyball in the last episode. Moneyball, they talk about it all the time. He calls up guys, what do you think about this guy? They're like, he's not available. What if I offer you this? That doesn't mean the trade was ever happening. And I think that's something, too, that got twisted with the Brewers leak about, like, well, the Brewers were calling the Mets. They were talking about a Pete Alonso trade. The Brewers were probably like, we'd give you this for Pete Alonso. And the Mets were like, go fuck yourself. Like, no way.
The Brewers don't want to pay Pete Alonso $20 million.
They don't
the
want
Brewers
to
don't have any money.
They don't want to pay Corbin Burns any money. He's sick. They just cut Brandon Woodruff. They're like, get out of here. Don't want you.
And Corbin Burns made like a pact with the Brewers, his agent going out publicly saying we're not signing an extension wherever we get traded.
Yeah.
Just trying to screw their return.
100%.
That's not a great organization right now.
No. Like, I think, relatively speaking, this is getting all overblown.
Totally.
And we're probably a little bit part of the problem here now making this
Now
video.
we are, yeah.
But we're clickbaiting. And to be fair, though, the information we're giving you is telling you this isn't happening.
First
It
5
shouldn't
seconds of the
happen.
episode. Should we Mets trade Pete Alonso?
No.
No.
The answer's no. Because
no
it's
way.
Just, it's so stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Any way you cut it, there's one way, and it's if you get elite prospects back, and they're not.
Or the other way people don't want to hear, you trade everything. And then you get back under the tax, you stop getting your draft pick pushed back 10 slots, and you really build this thing slowly.
But I don't think they want to do that. I don't think Steve Cohen wants to do that. I don't think the Mets can afford to do that. I don't think they can.
You can afford to do anything.
I mean, think right now the fan base is ornery for no reason.
No, totally. But I Major League Baseball teams should not make any decisions based on the thoughts of their fan base.
For sure. But
maybe this one. This one maybe.
We kind of know marketing's pretty big on this team. So, like, I mean, in the same regard, I don't really think they can afford to. Like, Steve Cohen came out with those big comments. We have a 3 to 5 year window that we're going to win. 2025 is the last year. After 2025, they want to tear it down. At least he tried. But
yeah,
like,
but I also, again, like that's also stupid in my brain. Like, I wouldn't hold ourselves vital right now to something that was said a couple years ago as a great soundbite.
no,
Like,
for sure.
as of right now, the 6th year of that window looks fucking sweet.
No, of
But
course.
like maybe the 5th year pretty good too. The 4th year looks bad. People are like, you said 3 to 5, he's a phony. No, some shit just didn't work out.
But we also know Mets fans. I mean,
Yeah, I know, Mets fans are
people
crazy.
listen to that
I
one
love Mets
idiot that we
fans.
won't mention on the podcast
Yeah,
ever,
ugh.
who's just screaming and yelling still about James McCann.
You guys see this? You guys see this? All of your Mets analysts should have this hair.
Yes.
That's a huge part.
Salicata. I'll say his
Oh,
name.
now you're saying his name?
No,
Was
the other guy I was talking about who has hissy fits.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Oh, God.
I think I'm
Bleep,
gonna leave that and
bleep
bleep it.
Yeah,
Beep,
bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you guys at home know. But like, moral of the story, again, kind of finishing up this thought process here. The Mets should not trade Pete Alonso. I don't think they will.
I don't think they will either.
And I think if they do, it's either a sign of it's all coming to an end, or they got just the craziest prospects package back.
Yeah, like if they get an offer for Pete Alonso, like the way he theoretically wants to get paid, like an Aaron Judge,
Like $300 million, which is insane
Sure,
because he should never get paid that money.
maybe that's how we do close this conversation about the fact that why there's no extension yet is just because as of right now, because Pete, they have all the leverage because no one else can offer deals. There's only them versus the Mets. Like there's no market. Be like, pay me like one of the best players in baseball. Which
No.
again, I can use if I'm Pete, I can use home runs and RBI to say I'm one of the best players in
Yeah.
baseball. But that it's just simply not true.
Like he's not better than Freddie Freeman.
No.
He's not better than Matt Olson.
Nope.
And he's third or fourth maybe. Like that's where he lands is like the third or fourth best first baseman in the game.
It's totally fair.
And Matt Olson's the same age as him, and Freddie Freeman's never gonna die. So, like, you're
And even,
just
like-
not getting paid more than them.
And then he just simply is never going to offer much by defensive value. Like Aaron Judge got that huge contract. But Boris came out and said that's a benchmark. He's playing center field.
Yeah,
It's very different than playing first base.
such a different value. People never have 7 WAR. It's
And-
never gonna happen.
No, and I still think I think a lot of people right now are underrating Pete and how he's going to grow. Like
Yes.
I had an argument with family over Christmas time, and there was like the comp got thrown out of really scared me. Ryan Howard,
Oh my god,
who also came up late, had these crazy power numbers, and fell off in an instant.
he came up later than Pete though.
A little bit, like
Yeah.
a year and a half later than
I
Pete.
think
He
like
came
2
to
or
25.
3.
He came to 25.
Okay,
I think
he was
I think he was up 24.
22, I think, or no,
No,
23.
he went to college.
23?
He was 23 or
he did go to
24.
college, yeah.
But I do think that there is kind of an idea that sometimes the slow lumbering first baseman can fall off quicker than other players on the field. But I also think the way that Pete Alonso has made upgrades in his plate discipline, his chase rate the last couple of years, and his walk rate kind of lead me to believe that even at his worst, he'll still be quite good.
I also think if Ryan Howard played in modern day baseball,
I think we know how he wasn't good.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I think he was so talented that they would have never let him fall off in that same regard. Because
Yeah, the same way.
like during his prime, genuinely speaking, one of the most
Feared power
electric
hitters.
first
Yeah.
baseman I've ever seen play, especially at the plate.
It also was funny that he was always, I felt like, regarded as the best player in those Phillies teams. When now looking back at the day of the numbers, it was very obviously Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley.
Yeah.
Those two guys especially. and
Rollins a
together.
little bit less because Rollins, looking back at his numbers, actually stunk.
Yeah,
but like,
fucking
it's
Utley.
unfortunately the fucking asshole.
It was definitely the prick with the slicky
yeah,
hair.
100%. And they had good pitching,
Like greasy shit.
really good pitching.
But that's a rat fuck. First one back.
Rat fuck.
Maybe we're yeah, we'll see.
It could be a second one.
It could be, yeah. But I digress. It doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense to trade Pete Alonso. I don't know how he's going to age. I don't know what his contract's going to look like. Even if he's the highest paid first baseman in baseball by a little bit,
That's
I think
fine.
that makes sense. But if he wants 10 for 300, also I'd be
No
like,
shot.
that doesn't make sense to me either.
And go play in Colorado.
Yeah, but then the prospect returns we're getting back, whatever. Like, give him the qualifying offer and get the draft pick. I'd rather draft pick than half the guys we're gonna get.
I think that's also a huge part that we didn't mention.
Yeah.
That draft pick, I think, is probably more valuable than what the prospect pool could be back for us. Could be.
But also, we're not like super capologists. We don't know depending on where our salary cap is, the penalty for where that
Yeah.
pick, what that pick will lie. If it's a first round pick, if it's a second round pick, I don't know.
End of the day, Don't trade Pete Alonso. Doesn't make any sense.
Shouldn't trade Pete Alonso.
Guys, thank you so much for listening and watching. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Peace out. See you guys next time.